Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Louis Shine, your host of the InterviewU, and we are back for another amazing episode. We have a special guest here today. We have Brian Stimatze of the Tap app. How's it going, Brian?
I'm good today. How are you, sir?
Doing well, man. It's a pleasure, getting on here with you and everything. We're going to have a really good time. And we are excited just to announce the connection between us because, with the podcast and with some of the things that I'm doing, especially just being in the coaching arena for some time, we're connecting with Tap App to just tell the masses pretty much about the great things that the app has to offer for athletes and those abroad. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So let's just jump into this thing. So we want to get started and just kind of talk a little bit about the Tap app. But before that, we want to get into your history. So talk to us a bit about your background, where you're from, and who is Brian Steinmetz?
Okay. So I am the middle child of three boys. I grew up on a grain farm in western Kansas. So I am a farm kid. I literally got off of a combine one night in the middle of the summer and moved to Phoenix, Arizona 5 days later to start school and pursue a career in architecture. Um, I really, from the time I was a little kid, as far back as I can remember, and the stories I'm told by family members, I wanted to spend all my time on the farm. I was one of those boys that wanted to be around his dad, wanted to be around his grandpa, and they were always out working. Of course, they were on farm equipment. That was fun when you were a little kid because it was just a joy to be with them. But during the winter months, when we couldn't be outside doing things, I was sitting at the kitchen table at the farm, drawing pictures of combines and tractors and trying to draw pictures of my dad and my grandpa. And it just drawing was always a big part of my life. If I wasn't outside, doing something on the farm, if I wasn't with my brothers, my uncles playing sports, I was sitting at the table drawing. And as I grew up, my two uncles, Ron and Oren, were huge influences on me. And I got started in sports really at 5 years old when we were at that age where we could play softball. So again,
Mhm.
I grew up playing sports. My brother Kevin was a huge influence on me. But as I got into junior high and was getting into junior high sports, I also was able to start taking drafting classes in high school. And of course, in junior high, we were only offered mechanical courses for mechanical drawings. So, from all the farm equipment that I would draw as a child, my family just figured I thought I would grow up and be a farmer. They thought I would grow up and become a mechanical engineer, and I would end up working for John Deere someday. And so that was always kind of a funny, tag that trailed me most of my time growing up from childhood into high school. And advancing into high school, stayed in sports, kept playing, had a pretty severe knee injury my sophomore year when football started. But academically, I had the opportunity to now experience not only mechanical drafting, but architectural drafting. And I
Mm.
had an instructor, and Mr. Dow. His son was in my class, but he was a huge influence on me. And he helped me kind of, once I started, kind of moving from mechanical drafting to architectural, that was really the next level of courses. I started to kind of develop a love for the aesthetic value of buildings. And he helped me kind of incorporate and understand that mechanical engineering, or the engineering and the science side of building things. I developed this love of the science of building buildings. So now all of a sudden I got to put that engineering aptitude to work along with, the artistic or the aesthetic value of what you see when you walk down the street or drive down the road through a big city.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of moved on from there. Mr. Dow really kind of helped me develop that ability in architecture, kind of coached me to be able to compete in some local drafting competitions where I scored fairly well. And really that was it. I did skip over one part in dating back to in the third grade, the first ever book report that I ever did in school. Our teacher handed out these books to us right after we started school. And I just remember this so clearly. My book was called Architecture. And it was my first of it. There was a young boy wanted to ask his dad to help him build a treehouse. So his dad says, well, what we need to do, we need to draw a picture of what we want this to be, and then we'll go buy the material, and then we'll draw a picture of what we want, and then we'll build the treehouse. And that stuck with me from that point on. So for all the years, I just didn't have a chance to really experience for myself until I got into high school.
Yeah.
And once I got into high school and was able to kind of marry those two elements together, the science of building buildings and the artistic or the aesthetic value of, the appearance of buildings, that's kind of when it really took off and changed for me. And kind of moving forward from that point, my goal was to go to college and maybe trade my love of playing football, for an education in architecture and still be able to walk after I was done. Didn't quite work out the way I planned. It got derailed because of that knee injury, and that kind of led me into coaching.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really good. Just with architecture, for me, that was one of my loves. Like I told you the story before, but being when I first went to college, my major was architecture, and so as I started like some of the courses that they had a prerequisite type course where you have to go through certain core courses first or whatever as you're leading up to it. So I didn't completely get all the way into it, but it was my first semester, it was my first year. And so when I started playing basketball, I quickly found out that some of the classes that I had to take that I was trying to register for were like at the same time as my practices. So, and the way they explained it to me was that would probably be consistent up through like junior year or whatever. So I had to
Yeah.
make a quick choice and I chose basketball. So, but architecture is always near and dear to my heart. As a matter of fact, while we're talking, a side note, I went to a event not too long ago. I was there with my wife, and guess who had a table there? The Chicago, um, the Chicago Architecture Center. And so they gave me 2 tickets to come and do their tour, like, of their facility. I've never been there. So like, yeah, I jumped on that. So I got 2 tickets. We're gonna go check it out and do like the whole tour and everything like that. So side note, architecture, but so but yeah, architecture, that's near and dear to my heart. It's so funny just with us connecting, and you're an architect. So it's just like, small world. So but thank you for sharing, some of that that you shared. And so one of the things I would like to ask is like just on this journey of architecture, like what have been some of the memorable moments or projects that you come across that just really was like fulfilling to you in just your genre, your expertise, your field? Like what things stick out the most to you?
Well, one of the best, or I'd say maybe one of the influences, one of the things I really love about architecture is I love exposed structures.
Mm.
Buildings that have exposed structural steel, and when you can kind of make those structural elements part of your design concept. I've had the opportunity to be part of teams that develop new schools where you walk in the front door and there's some structural elements that really kind of take your eye and they get your attention. Even some residential projects in that same manner. I've had a pretty wide array. Starting out in a small firm in Western Kansas, in my hometown, I spent my first 16 years there. And the great thing about being in that small town and that small firm was we got exposed to everything. I mean, everything from small banks to large banks, small school additions to large schools, colleges. Yeah, I mean, you just name it. We had all kinds of opportunities. One of my best clients now, believe it or not, are car washes. And I have 2 franchises that I designed for, and we have car washes in multiple states. And the one thing that I notice is that everything seems to be growing in aesthetic value.
Yeah.
People are spending a little bit more money. Everything is about curb appeal. And I have had the opportunity, I actually, on a project I was working with a contractor on. Believe it or not, it was a hotel in Chicago, just down Cicero from which airport is that? Not
Midway,
O'Hare.
midway.
Midway, yeah.
Mhm.
And so I actually had to fly to Chicago. This has been just a few years back, stayed right downtown next to City Hall. We actually met in the mayor's office, but the meeting to start that meeting was actually at a little bakery about a mile away. So
Mm.
I got a quick little tour of downtown Chicago and the river, and just really enjoyed just kind of walking around, staring at the sky, looking at all the buildings there. It was a great time.
Yeah, no, that's really good stuff, man. Chicago's definitely one of the places that it's some amazing architecture here, and it's so funny because now that I'm back in the area, grew up here, but when I would come and visit when I was like, living other places and different things like that, I'm always still to this day when I go downtown, it's even hard to drive because I'm trying to look at buildings, and it's just like, you know what I'm saying? So like I'm gonna have to get a driver one day to really so I can take it in. But a lot of times I'll go out on the pier, past like Soldier Field, and you can see like a beautiful like yeah, that's probably one of the best views in the city where you can see like almost the entire span of the downtown from the lakeside, and you can really just see the buildings. So, no, I really love it, and so no, it's just really good to hear that and just really connect with you on that note because I do love architecture, and so um, kind of moving along to some of the other things we want to kind of discuss. So you had your architecture, you had your stint with like sports and things of that nature where now does that love for, potentially helping athletes and, as we move into talking a little bit about the Tap app, how did that all, start?
So I think that probably everybody that I've ever coached with gets into coaching at whatever level, whether it's youth or high school, or that move on and use it as their main profession in college and above. It's always been about passing something along, trying to mentor these younger athletes, bring them along, and really, I think most of us have an influence in our life that saw something in us that nobody else did and tried to help extract that out and really pushed us. Athletics is that one place, it's that one field where you really can just push somebody to be their best. And
Mhm.
and that's part of it. It's just part of being an athlete. Um, I had that opportunity to start coaching at a young age at lower levels, and just kind of kept working my way up. And as I worked my way up through the ranks and made it up to, a high school, varsity defensive coordinator, the one thing that I started to recognize, and I saw this happen probably more so as my son and his group started to, hit that age where we knew recruiting was going to become part of it. These, 95% of every child or every high school athlete that goes out for a sport at one point or another talks about wanting to move on to that next level. And I think that whether I was helping a defensive back with his footwork or helping the defensive team try to understand the concept of timing on a blitz package, you also recognize these kids needed help understanding the recruiting platform. And I had spent enough time around college coaches and actually had taken a break for about 3 years from high school coaching here, and was actually became a recruiter for the junior college that my son Zach played for, which
Yep.
was Mesa Community College. Um, and that was my first taste at actually reaching out to athletes and doing it from a recruiting side and talking to them about it. And that 3 years gave me kind of a little bit more of a foundation that once I got back into coaching, I started to notice that, I have some players on my team that just really nobody is noticing. And so everything for me kind of goes back to the fundamentals of architecture. You see a problem, a client comes in, they have a problem, and you try to design a solution to fit and fix a problem. Excuse me. And so really that's kind of where Tap App came from. Tammy, my wife Tammy, was a high school athlete. She was recruited. She was a multi-sport athlete in college. and then she coached actually in high school before we moved from Kansas to Arizona. And we always had that conversation. We felt like, there were times like, okay, we may not have Division I athletes, but we have athletes that are not even getting looked at. And
Mhm.
so we just set out to find a way. We wanted to create a way. And, that was one thing that I was kind of a goal of mine. And it's the same thing with starting the firm that I own today. It's one thing to take over an existing firm. It's another thing to just create something from nothing and try to turn it into something that, that has an impact or a positive influence on the community, on the people around you. So this really kind of dates back to 2017. Um, I had three players that were getting ready to start their senior year. They all came to me one day during, we were actually up in the mountains for our summer camp before we came down to the heat and started practice in the middle of July. And they said, Coach, we want to go somewhere. We want to go to school. We want to play college football, but we don't really know how to do it.
Mhm.
And I kind of gave them, I sat down with them, I talked to them, I wrote down some instructions. Hey, you need to get your huddle film put together. You need to get your academics put together. Kind of gave them a sequence of what to do. And what most of them did, three in particular, I started getting emails from email addresses I didn't recognize, didn't really have a clear name on who it was. They were my players, and I didn't even know which one was being represented in this video or even in this email. And it just so happened at the time I was working with another gentleman, and he was developing a digital business card. And this was a digital business card that could just be shared from phone to phone. And I happened to be driving back to my office one day, and I saw a ping on my phone and looked at it, and it was his digital business card popped up on my phone. And I thought,
Mhm.
what would be cool? What if I just changed business information to a high school athlete? I mean, that digital business card was kind of like your business resume. And if I was like, what if we turned that app into a sports recruiting app? I could just send it out to coaches from phone to phone because it was a web-based application. And so I went to practice. I told these three kids, get me some information. I set up three apps and I started sending them out to coaches. And within 24 hours, I got multiple responses. And part of the response from the coach was, where did you find this app? How did you do this? And how can we get our hands on it? How can we get more kids to create an app like this and send it to us? We have everything we need right here on our phone. We have video links, we have academic information, we have, their highlights. I mean, we literally have everything we need to look at to make that initial evaluation to say, this name goes on our board, or, hey, this is somebody we're going to pass on. You just don't fit the profile, or we're not looking for that position. And that's really how Tap App was born.
Wow. That's phenomenal. I mean, especially, I coach college basketball, and just knowing all the nuances and different things that we have to do to, get players, find players, fish through a whole bunch of emails, all kind of things, all those kind of things. Just to hear this is like super amazing. Because, coaches are busy, and
Right.
so they're on their phones. That's one thing I learned. Coaches are on their phones. So if they can get something directly to the device that they're carrying while they're on the go, and they may not be like in the office or anything like that, that's also helpful. But also it's the simplicity of the way that the information comes through. And I know just from being a coach, like as simple as it can be, as quick as it can be, as easy as it is to access, that's what I'm looking for. So no, that's just a really good just explanation of what that is. And so I want to get to the next question here. You talked about Tap App, how it came into play. You talked a little bit about, honestly, with your story, just your athletes, and which kind of shows the next question I was going to ask is that desire. How did that, come about? Maybe we can just talk a little bit more about that, but you kind of answered a little bit of it, just in seeing how, your passion for helping those that are maybe being overlooked or not being looked at. Maybe we could discuss that a little bit more. Just how that went further in terms of just in the development of it and just kind of how it took off?
So yeah, so it really at that time when this was all first starting, I was kind of hitting that point where, really kind of the state of Arizona was kind of growing out of a recession. I was getting busier, and really Tammy and I sat down one day, and Tammy, my wife, Tammy, who's been as involved with this for me from the beginning for like the last 8 years. This has really been a partnership with Tammy and I doing this because of both of our backgrounds. Tammy was actually talking to a friend of hers who her husband was a retired Major League Baseball player, and that runs a club team here in the Metro Phoenix area. And Tammy just happened to be telling this friend of hers about it. She showed it to her husband, and she said, "Wow, you could really help a lot of kids with this."
Mm.
And so Tammy and I, for about a year, were having a conversation, and I was starting to, work 80 hours a week, 90 hours a week in my office on building projects, all while trying to spend 40 hours a week preparing a football team for a game on Friday night.
Yeah.
Because I'm just, when you do this, everybody says, well, I'm going to coach, but I'm not going to be in full. There's no such thing as part-time coaching. When you coach and you love the sport and you're there for the kids and you're there for the program, you're just in it. So I had that same story. I was working on building plans until 10 o'clock at night, and from midnight or 10 o'clock to 2 a.m. I'm watching game film, figuring out writing a game plan, and trying to prepare practice schedules for the next day for my defense. And really, it got to a point where Tammy came to me and she said, it was affecting my health. And she said,
Mhm.
you're going to have to make a decision. You can't do all three. There's just not enough time.
Yeah.
And, I couldn't give up architecture. That was kind of the foundation. That was my life's passion. But sports and coaching and helping kids, believe it or not, for me was a part-time thing. And that was kind of the thing that lowered my blood pressure. That was my fun time. But I had initially some very initial success with the Tap app. And Tammy just sat down one day and she said, you got to make a decision. Something's got to go. And it's like, you know what? I could control everything a little better doing, working and, doing architecture during the day and Tap app in the evenings and weekends, working with athletes. And coaching was the thing that had to go, because when we were in season, it was just too much.
Mhm.
Out of season, because we still spent 10 months of the year working on our program, whether we were in season or in spring practice. Some are 7-on-7 and practices in the morning in the weight room. And so I was trying to, leave home and go to the weight room and, do 7-on-7 practice in the morning, and then go back to my office and work, and then be back at 7-on-7 competition in the evening. And it was just physically, it was just too much. And I had to just, basically in 2018, we kind of made the decision that this would be my last year coaching, and that we were really then going to try to take Tap Out to the next level. And we set out to try to go national with it.
Mhm.
And so our app has gone through, it's evolved. We kind of started and we got a little feedback from parents and said, what do you like, what you don't like? But one of the main things that I also wanted to point out was, there's always a little bit of confusion with this, so I kind of want to clarify this. There is recruiting services, which are all over the place, and then ours is more of a recruiting platform. We are not the responsible party to call coaches all the time, to try to find, homes for athletes. We will help some of the athletes if we're requested to, but what we really kind of did was we built a system that's more of a do-it-yourself. And when we say do it yourself with us in the background. We have some programming where we guide and direct our athletes and the parents, and we do a lot of Zoom meetings with athletes and parents. We give them information, we coach them, but what we try to share with them is that youth athletics has grown so huge in this country, but colleges and college programs didn't grow with them. So where in the 70s, in the 80s, when I graduated high school in 83, coaches made their rounds in the States, or they had local recruiters, and they still have that. But now They used to be able to hit those target points and look at athletes, talk to coaches they know and watch game film and start picking out athletes. Now there's 11, 12, 15 million high school athletes, playing, softball in the summer, soccer year round, baseball year round, football goes on year round, basketball goes on year round. So there's just not enough time for coaches and their recruiting budgets to get everywhere.
Yeah.
So, as everything progressed toward that element that everybody has in their pocket or holds in their hand, pretty much everybody's life runs by that phone. So we have kind of retooled this app a couple of times, and we've added elements to it so that you know our coaches can go online and search for athletes. They can find them, but instead of us doing an email dump like a lot of the software programs do, ours is built more on an individual basis. All the apps look the same, but the information's different, and the opportunities of what the athletes or the coaches can do with the app have. We really feel like we've gone in a different direction from most recruiting services.
Hmm. No,
Um,
yeah.
and maybe one of the best details that we've come up with so far, the best feedback we've gotten is, now when I grew up in sports, we didn't have iPads and email and huddle where you just could post messages.
Yeah.
We had a board or a bulletin board in our locker room, and we walked up and looked at the list on the bulletin board, who's starting this week, what's the practice schedule. It was always posted. So we kind of went old school and created a bulletin board in our apps to where the owner of that app can send messages out. So you could be a coach at any level of a program, and you could post a message about your campus. You could post a message about your program. You could post a message about a roster need or a recruiting need that you're looking for, or an area that you were going to be in recruiting any specifics. And everybody on our platform gets a push notification on their phone that tells them what's happening. And the reason for that is, one of the biggest things that we've experienced is either athletes and parents feel like they know everything about recruiting and don't need help, or there's the bigger group that need help but don't know who to ask or where to start. So our program is really kind of built to help, to help those that need the help find their way to the next level and to educate them. And that's why we like doing a podcast like this, is we want to share that information. And we have partnerships with former college athletes and pro athletes that tell their story and tell those true recruiting journeys, what their recruiting journey was like, what influenced them, what made them choose the school that they selected, what maybe made them decide to transfer to a different school. And we kind of tie all that back into the TAP app. So we're really kind of building a network, just for the athletes, the coaches, and the parents.
Yeah, this is awesome, man. I mean, because it's real athletes that need real help, and especially with like some of the things coming down the pipe that can limit opportunities. You have NIL that's kind of in the play now, and then you have when I was coaching, I know that there's, you have your junior college, you have, prep school, you got high school, but now the portal and things of that nature. And so it's not to say that, like athletes that are looking to get somewhere, can't, but just having that help is real so that there can be more exposure, especially if someone has talent and they're not getting the proper look, or they may just have that talent, but as we know, coaches, they're just not going to just show up in a gym just because, they need a reason why they should. So they need access to those highlights. They need a tap app so that they can see what's available, that if that athlete didn't have a tap app or a way to get their name out there, then there's nobody knows who you are. And
Yeah.
so that's why for me this is very awesome, because I've been that athlete coming out of high school that I did not, I was before my time in terms of before the time of the technologies that were here, but just being a part of that era helps me to understand why this is so important. And then being a coach in the current era, it even further signifies it because there's still some holes there where a tap app can be very valuable, to the recruitment, the recruitment span of an athlete, So this is amazing. And so, with that, which I feel like would tie this in a little more, like tell us a few testimonies. I know just with the lifespan of Tap App thus far, there's a lot of people that have been helped. Just talk to us about a few testimonies that's just near and dear to your heart that, just really is a blessing to you with starting this and seeing the fruit of it. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I tell you, one of my favorite stories, and I'm going to backtrack just a little bit because you said something that reminded me of really what made our idea and this platform take off. We were off the field one Friday night. We had lost a game, and we were waiting for the players to get on the bus. And one of the parents had wanted to talk to me about recruiting help, and they were talking to me about the platform and why should we use the platform. And I just wasn't really thinking, but I kind of listened to everything they had to say, and I said, well, how's your recruiting going so far? And they said, well, I said, how many coaches are you talking to on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? Or how many letters are you getting? And I said, no, not letters from a college admissions office, but from a coach, because that's when recruiting is happening. And they said, well, we're trying to, and I said, you know what? Here's the reason you should use our app. If they can't find you, they can't sign you. It's that simple. So exposure is everything. And I said, our platform really focuses on the student athlete as well as their parent, kind of in the background, getting multiple exposures. And I said, think about it this way. As adults, when you're coming through college, or whether you leave high school and you start looking for a job or you want to change jobs, everybody wants to feel loved. Everybody wants somebody to come recruit them, but it doesn't happen for everybody. There's a top 300 recruits in the nation that are on ESPN for a reason. Everybody else has a much different story.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't play. It just means somebody hasn't found you because they're focused somewhere else. So I kind of told them, I said, and I came home. I didn't. I actually got on the bus and I called Tammy and I said, hey, guess what? It just came out of my mouth. And I told her, and she has just never let me forget that. And that has really become the main catchphrase for the Total Athlete Profile, or the TAP app, is, hey, look, if they can't find you, they can't sign you. So we have really tried to simplify this process down to, and the basis of it is, most coaches, if they haven't found you, they don't want to talk to me. They don't want to talk to your parent, and they really don't want to talk to your high school coach. They need to see some film, and they need to do that 2-minute assessment that says, I'm going to put this person's name on our board and keep an eye on them, or I may reach out to them and ask for more, or, hey, that person looks good, but that's not a recruit that I typically chase, because every coach has a style of athlete, a build, something that there's an eye test, and the eye test is up to them. But they see something in that video within 2 minutes, and you're either on their list, however short or long that list is, or you're just not, and they move on. So our whole program was built around, hey, if you want to have an opportunity to level the play field, if they don't come to you, be proactive and go find them. If you graduate college and some company didn't come that you wanted to recruit you to come to work for them, you don't just go sit at home. You fill out a resume, you start sending it out, and you go try to recruit somebody to want you to hire you. Yeah. So with, as you pointed out, with the transfer portal and NIL, that's all become about marketing. And really all of recruiting in our vision has become about marketing. Everybody has become a brand, and you're marketing your brand to as many schools as you want. So one of the best stories that we have happened about 3 years ago. Well, it actually started 4 years ago. We were wrapping up an update to the TAP app, and I got a call from a gentleman named Mark Craig one night. And he and his daughter, who was a softball player north of Chicago, They had seen some of the, information that we were constantly posting on Twitter at the time, and they really liked what they saw. And Mark reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about your platform, your app. Like, what can you do for my daughter? And how does this work?" So we kind of went through the process. And the thing I liked about it was we tend to build relationships with the people that call us and talk to us.
Yeah.
And now of course Angelina was playing on a club team. She was on a travel team, and Mark had divulged how many thousands of dollars he had spent that summer between her junior and senior year.
Mhm.
And she was being told that a school in Ohio and a school in Michigan and a school in Florida were recruiting her. And, the coach was not a big fan of them bringing in another outside service, which, again, we weren't really a recruiting service. It was more for them to help just gain exposures.
Mhm.
So Mark said, "Hey, we're going to sign up on your program and have you help us get more exposures, but we're really going to kind of keep it, on the down low as far as from those coaches." Angelina started her senior year of high school and kept waiting for those schools to call. And we were just starting to come out of COVID, and where all of the classes were being given that extra extended year. They were given an extra year of eligibility. And so Angelina's class was not being as heavily recruited because athletes were hanging around school one extra year. I got a call from Chicago to Phoenix at about 11:30 one night. So it's 1:30 in the morning, and I have an upset dad on the phone. Mark called. I was in my office working, and he said, "Brian, Angelina's reached out to these 3 schools, and not only do they not have a spot for her, they've never even heard of her."
Mhm.
And I said, "Mark, I'm just going to add your name to the list of how many parents call me and tell me the same story," which is why we tell them, really, you need to take matters into your own hands. You did
Mhm.
all this work to get yourself to the opportunity of being recruited. Now you're going to turn it over and put it in somebody else's hands. I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah.
That's how we promoted this platform. I listened to Mark for about 30 minutes, and I asked him, I said, "Hey," I said, "I was working with a girl in Texas that just decommitted from Oklahoma State. Would that even be an attractive opportunity?" And literally the phone went dead silent. "Mark, you still there?" He says, "Yeah, I'm still here." He said, "How'd you know about Oklahoma State?" I'm like, "Well, I grew up in Big 8 country, so I'm very familiar with Oklahoma State. Of course, now the Big 12." I said, "But," I said, "I was actually working with a young lady in Texas who decommitted. As far as I know, I believe Oklahoma State probably has a couple of opportunities and scholarships available. Would you even be interested?" And Mark said, "That was Angelina's dream school." And I said, "Why haven't you pursued them then?" And he goes, "Well, her coaches were telling her she really wasn't Oklahoma State material. She really needed to focus on Ohio State, Michigan State, and Central Florida." And I'm like, "Well, Mark," I said, "my opinion is, how about if we let the Oklahoma State coach decide whether or not Angelina is Oklahoma State material?"
Yes.
So I said, "You know what?" I said, "I have a client in Stillwater that I know is friends with the football coach. I don't know if he knows the softball coach or not." I said, "I'm going to make a call tomorrow and I'll call you back." I called my client. He said, "The softball coach lives next door to me." And we're actually playing in a golf tournament tomorrow, and we're sharing a cart. He said, have your athlete update her app and send it to me, and I'll make sure he looks at it." And sure enough, they called me that night and said, "Call your athlete and tell them that we're going to call her tomorrow. The softball coach is going to call her at 9 o'clock in the morning." They called her and they invited her to a camp in October. And so Mark's like, they got to town a day early, and he and his wife Janice, and they kind of toured around, fell in love with Stillwater and Oklahoma State. And Mark was so nervous, he called me about 100 times, I think, in 48 hours. And he said, he called me Sunday morning and said, Coach said, "Hey, when the game's over," they had the girls at the camp divided up playing a game, and he said, when the game's over, before you leave, stop by my office." So Mark calls me, and he's like, he was just almost sick. He goes, "I haven't eaten in 2 days. I'm just so nervous because I want this to work out." And I said, "Well, Mark, I don't know what he's going to tell you, but I sincerely doubt he's going to have you stop by so he can thank you for just, paying to come to his camp and contributing money. I said, but, let me know. And then I didn't hear from him for 6 hours. And I just was sitting on pins and needles. I had no idea what was going on. And then Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. And I'm like, Mark, talk to me. And I couldn't understand what he was saying. And I understand he was crying.
Mm.
I mean, this big grown man was crying. And I'm like, Mark, are you okay? And he said, Brian, they offered Angelina a scholarship.
Wow.
And I literally, before that was over, I was crying too. I was sitting there
Wow.
crying. And I'm like, so Mark and Janice and their daughter Angelina sitting in their rental car on the campus of Oklahoma State, and me sitting in my office in Chandler, Arizona, and we're on the phone, and the four of us are sitting here just crying on the phone. And
Mm.
that was one of the first big experiences where I realized, what Tammy and I set out to do was to have an impact on somebody's life, to have a positive impact, and to help, people who just needed a little bit of guidance, a little bit of direction. They needed some exposure. They needed a different plan, because the software that was just sending, doing email drops, and this needed a personal touch. Because, and we always tell people that don't really think about it this way, if you want that coach at that college to, whether it's a scholarship, or we always say reach in his bag of money and give you some financial assistance to go to school, it's going to take a relationship. You need to give them a reason to do that. And it starts by the athlete reaching out to the coach and talking to him and building a relationship, because you got to remember, this is how that coach makes his living.
Yeah.
Based on who he brings in. So they got to look into everything. They got to, talk to the parents, get to know the athlete, and find out, is this athlete really committed to what it takes to be a college athlete? Because it does become a job.
Yeah.
Because they're for your school. And it's a difference between playing on a travel team in the summer, or playing on a high school team, or playing for an institution, a university, or a junior college. But having that experience, and then realizing that we will be connected for the rest of our lives. And fast forward a year, and I'm watching Angelina play in the Women's College World Series on ESPN. And
Wow.
Mark, they're sending me pictures, holding, when they won their super regional, and they have the big poster and they're standing by it, and they're doing all the little pictures that the athletes get to do with their families. And you look, and because I'll admit to you, and you've done this, and I know you'll appreciate this. There were nights in the beginning for the first 3 or 4 years, and even times when my own wife Tammy thought that I was nuts. I would work Fridays, and Friday nights we'd maybe go out for dinner, and we'd come home, and at 9 o'clock I'm back in my office, and I'm up till 2 or 3 or 4 Saturday morning, just trying to work our way through this process and try to make connections with athletes and answer messages on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, or somebody that had gotten the email, and making those coaching contacts, because we had a taste of this. We saw what we were doing could work, and we have more stories like that. But that was probably one of the ones that always stands out, was Angelina Craig and her family, and that journey from you know hitting that brick wall and not understanding why. And I'm not saying that anybody was facetious or misled them or gave them the wrong information, but they found that when they decided to just take their future, put it in their own hands, and say, hey, the schools that I want to look at are not looking at me.
Mhm.
So you know what? There's no law that says I can't go recruit a school and introduce myself to a coach. And a lot of times, I kind of equate it to, and football's kind of my sport, but how many times do we see undrafted, rookie free agents end up earning a roster spot in the NFL?
Yeah.
Well, you could call that a walk-on in college. It's a higher level. But it's about getting an opportunity and getting on the field and just go perform.
Yeah.
And so it just, the level elevates as you go, but there's a reason why, that numbers out there that floats around, everybody says, hey, 7% of high school athletes are all that make it to the next level. The other thing that really pushed us to do this, and one of the biggest influences we found was, as we got going, I started noticing, starting about June 20th until about August the 20th, no matter where I'm at, even if I'm on vacation, my phone starts ringing off the wall. And it's not architecture clients, it's coaches all over the country. Hey, I need 5 more players just to start fall practice for football. If you can find me 5 athletes, I don't care if they haven't worked out since football ended their senior year. If you can get them to me, we can scholarship them. We'll get them in school and get them on the roster. We need players. And then school gets started, and then the basketball coaches start calling. Hey, we had 3 athletes that just didn't show up. So what we found were, we had this group of athletes that thought, because somebody didn't come recruit me, somebody didn't come love me, somebody didn't come, stroke me, my ego, or caress me, or say, hey, we love you, we want you to come play with us. Nobody wants me. My career's done. They throw their cleats away. They go get a part-time job. They decide to go a different location or a different direction in college. And then I'm calling them in May, June, July, and in August saying, hey, you told me, and there's opportunities. I've got 3 schools right now that will scholarship you. Now, one may be in Massachusetts, but if you want to go to college and play college football, I've got 3 opportunities, and they need a receiver, or they need an offensive lineman, or a defensive back, whatever it may be. But after that, and really, it's like, because when you get to campus and you get on field, it's just like taking a job. It's on you to perform and keep that job and keep that roster spot and grow with that team and that program. So that was really kind of a big, broad picture of how we kind of sort of tailored our platform a little away from the traditional recruiting service. Is our platform was really built more on empowering student athletes with the support of their parents to kind of forge their own path and say, this is where I want to go. Or, I found, hey, this school in Utah that I didn't know about, they need 2 defensive backs, and I could compete there. And your app to app connection with the coaching staff.
Yeah. Man, that's all. This is powerful, especially when you telling me the story. It got me a little bit emotional. I ain't show it, but it was coming on me, But that's amazing, and I think that's what it's about. That story pretty much signifies it all. I mean, that's amazing, and because on the side of an athlete and even parent, it's like, man, it can be hard. The recruiting, it can be hard to, like, let alone all of the smoke and mirrors of, hey, someone's recruiting you and they're really not, or like, maybe you think that you're going to get an offer and you're waiting for that offer, or, in my case, I got an offer and then someone decommitted and came back on the scene and they dropped my offer and went another direction. So the recruiting trail can be very, very interesting. So just to hear a story like that really, this really drives things home in terms of the Tap app. And so, what's the future? What's the future for Tap app? What do you have on tap? For the Tap app.
So we are right now set up and licensed in the United States. We eventually want to go global, and that takes a little bit of work and attorneys and some partnerships for licensing. The one thing that we really want to do, though, is really right now is really get a little farther down. Plant a few more roots right here around us. Um, People don't understand that. Like when my son was playing, and he had the same recruiting story, or recruiting or situation that you had, where he had been offered scholarships to play safety, but if he wanted to be a quarterback, which was his main position, they had 6 already in the room. He's number 7. You got to beat 4 guys out. But he also had a best friend, and Billy was an all-state linebackers junior year and an all-state defensive end his senior year, that got 0 offers. And I would talk to the junior college coach that Zach eventually was going to sign with, and I said, hey, Billy doesn't have any offers. He asked me when Zach was getting ready to sign, he wanted to know where Billy was going. And I said, Billy has no offers. And he said, we didn't recruit him because he's a D1 ball player. That kid would walk in and compete for a D1 program, probably at linebacker his freshman year. You know, the coach again said things in practice, but it didn't pan out. And really that kind of pushed us when I made some phone calls and found out again, school didn't even know who he was. So moving through into the future, the more we see these stories, the more we're going to try to get our platform out and explain to, just try to get everybody to understand that really this is your journey. It's your story.
Yeah.
You're the athlete that's going to school, that's going to end up doing all the work, that's going to have, that's going to be on the field playing eventually someday. So we're trying to empower them to understand that, rules change all the time. You mentioned the transfer portal and NIL. That has completely changed everything. High school athletes now are having to take a little bit more of a different journey, and it's pretty discouraging because, so there's a story about an athlete right now that I'm aware of. He's a football player, and he has a couple of small Division I schools looking at him, and the one he wants to go to, they have 2 open positions that he plays, but the coaching staff has been out to watch him play, but they've not made an offer. And he's reached out to them, and they're like, okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm looking at a couple of players in the transfer portal, and one happens to be 22, and you're 17. And if I can get the 22-year-old that has that experience, I got to go with that. So now you got a 17-year-old in high school competing against a transfer portal athlete who can potentially step in and help the coach win now.
Yeah.
And then which can go and go look for these players. So again, this is where, where coaches couldn't even get out to see everybody now, before now, because of the number of high school athletes. Now high school athletes are taking a backseat to the transfer portal, which has kind of become like free agency for college coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got NIL as part of it. And, if you got one guy that's got an NIL opportunity or NIL money coming with him and transfers to a school, he can bring some other upperclassmen, and that's hurting the younger kids more. So we're really trying to get with these younger classes and help them understand that, the earlier you get your athletic profile, your recruiting profile, your academics, your highlights, and keep them updated. You literally need to start reaching out to college coaches your freshman year of high school. Now, you can do it your senior year, but you're just better if you start earlier. But you got to start reaching out to these coaches and start building relationships, because one day that relationship could come back and help you. And, there's kids that have multiple offers. I've had kids say, well, this coach has been calling me, and I'm like, answer the phone, talk to them. These are real people. And, when you're chasing an offer, if they end up taking a transfer portal athlete and you don't get that, now you're going to go back and try to call a coach that you've not been taking phone calls from, and he's moved on. So it's about, again, being respectful, understanding that coach is also looking to get better. You're looking for a place to go. And, so TapApp is kind of growing even because of that transfer portal. When those athletes go into the portal, what are they doing? They're going right back into the same position they were when they were being recruited as a high school athlete. They're coming back onto the recruiting platforms and then trying to share their information. So we're now trying to build relationships with junior college programs and smaller school programs where we're trying to get our app into their athletic department, not only to help their coach find new players, but, there's transfers across that portal as well as the high school athletes. And so we're working right now with 2 junior colleges specifically, and then we will expand from there. And we have we have club coaches that are starting to jump on and starting to look at bringing, maybe replacing a recruiting platform or service with our recruiting platform and putting each of their athletes on the app. And as well as we have professional scouts now that are starting to recognize our app. A couple scouts that are, in baseball are recognizing that, hey, I might find that athlete in high school. And And really, kind of probably maybe one of the stories out there that not everybody knows, but I know this. Josh Allen, the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills.
Yep.
Josh Allen literally was in the same position coming out of high school and out of junior college that most of our athletes are. He was a 3-star after 2 years of junior college. Nobody recruited him. You know what Josh Allen did? If you read his story, he sent 1,000 VHS tapes, not trade an app on a smartphone. He physically mailed 1,000 VHS tapes out to universities, to college coaches everywhere, and got one opportunity. Nobody knew who Josh Allen was. I bet you 90% of the sports world knows that name now. So again, Aaron Rodgers, another athlete that was not highly recruited, that went the junior college route and had to go prove himself at Cal. But look at his career. So we try to tell athletes that we come into contact with, look, as long as you're willing to go do the work, we have a platform that we just want to get you connected. And that's what we did with Angelina Craig. We just, we were kind of the middleman in starting that connection. After that, she went to the camp. She impressed the coach. She's the one that won the scholarship. It wasn't us. And that's what our platform is built for.
Yeah.
This is built to level the playing field. If these coaches aren't recruiting you, guess what? Here, go recruit them. Go tell them who you are. Be proud of who you are and what you've accomplished and where you're at, and just say this is part of the journey. But your journey is going to be a great story that is probably going to inspire an athlete someday down the road.
Yeah, man, phenomenal. I love it. I love the vision of it. Love the backstory. Love where you're taking this thing. And so it's really been amazing to have you on, just to tell your story and tell other stories, within the story of Tap App as well. Let everyone know that's listening how they can find Tap App on social, web, you name it. Let everybody know where they can find you.
So our website is www.tapapp.pro, tapapp.pro. We are on X. We are Tap Profile App. On Instagram, it's total.athlete.profile. Same with Facebook. And we are under Total Athlete Profile in the Apple App Store. We are working on, we're only in the Apple App Store at the moment, but we are in the process of converting our programming software so that we're on Google Play and the App Store. So that's in the works. It's coming.
Yes. No, this is phenomenal, Brian. I appreciate you for being a guest on the podcast, and thanks for letting me interview you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Well, hey guys, make sure you share this episode with anybody that you feel like might want to listen, or anybody that might benefit from the Tap app. It's a major tool, especially for athletes coming out of high school and even junior college trying to make it to the next level. I believe it's something very special. So make sure you share this with them, tag it. If you're on Twitter listening to this or watching this, retweet so people can check out the episode. But until next time, thanks for letting me interview you, and we will see you on the next episode.